I am very excited to talk to the wonderful Raechel Whitchurch. Raechel, hello.
Hey, so thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Your album Finally Clear is one of my favorites, actually, not just favorite of last year,
Aw.
favorites. So
I bet you say that to every person on your that you interview.
no, I don't actually, because I believe in authenticity and honesty, and I love that album. I listen to it a lot because every single song on it is wonderful and valuable and has a great story behind it. But we'll get to those songs because I actually wanted to start almost back at the very beginning of you, but more at the beginning of your musical life, which is that you started playing piano at 5, and then I was reading that you gave it away at the age of 8 for the mandolin. And I'm wondering what is so good about a mandolin that you would give up such a fine instrument as piano?
Nothing, except you can't take a piano in a car to a country music gig. That was literally the only reason. Mum and Dad were like, we can't transport a piano. You're gonna have to learn something a little bit more manageable for the road. I was like, okay. But look, I played classical piano for years, and I did I kept playing it after I learned the mandolin, and I think probably till I was, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something. And I did, my exams and, all of that. And I still, I don't play now, but, the theory of piano, I think really solidified, what I know about music. And I actually have just made my son start learning piano. So he's only 5, and so I've just got him to start learning. So he's got a little keyboard out there that, look, it's not going great, I'm not going to lie. So I don't know if he's going to be very good at it.
Well, look, the intention counts.
That's right. And I thought anything musical is nice, so it's fine. But my hopes and dreams for him have just washed away. No, it's fine. He's very good at other things. But yes, he's just started with that. But yeah, then I learned the mandolin, and mostly just because my fingers were so little, I couldn't get them around a guitar, and so got the mandolin, which has obviously got a smaller neck, and just started playing that. And my brother started playing drums at the same time, and that was kind of enough to start a family then. My mum was on bass, my dad was on guitar. We were good to go.
So it sounds a bit like your parents were putting you on an instrument with the intention of starting the family band, because if they were like,
oh, 100%.
Okay, right.
Yeah, because people are like, oh, well, you guys musical and then started a family band. I'm like, no, you've got it back to front. My parents wanted to start a family band, so they made us learn an instrument. I know it gets more ridiculous as the story goes on. I'm like, guys, dad could play a little bit of guitar. My mum, who it's just mind blowing. Like, she had, 4 kids by 24. So that gives you some insight into, her life. And so, she I used to find it so encouraging though, because, she was 18 when she had me. And so I'm just trying to do the math in my head. And so when I started, I was 8. And so at 26, she picked up the bass. She learned the bass guitar at 26, and so we all we all kind of had to learn something. Everyone was like, well, how did this, well, my dad and mum just said, we're going to start a family band. Do you want to? And we were like, yeah, sounds great. And so that's how we were. Pretty bad when we started, I'm not going to lie. We weren't like the best thing around. Even when we finished, we weren't the best thing around. So, but my parents were very excuse me, my parents were very focused on creating a lifestyle more than, chasing fame, if that makes sense. They really wanted the family to stay together. They wanted to get us out of the small town that we lived in, which is a lovely town. We grew up in Broken Hill, but just, very insular and far from everything. And they just could see that, maybe if we didn't get out, we would never get out. And so they took a chance, and I guess my dad, who is just very entrepreneurial and always worked for himself, so we played in the family band, but then he also would do car window tinting. That was his trade when he was young. And so sometimes if we were running low on money, he'd just go off on his own for a couple of weeks to some regional towns, and because they were always looking for window tinters, so he'd go and do car window tinting, and surprisingly good money in it, and then he'd come back, and so I don't know, it seemed moderately normal to me that we were just living in a caravan in some random town, and my dad was just going off to do some window tinting. Oh, he's back now, let's get back to the gigs.
I'm wondering about the dynamics of rehearsal when you're living with the band members in a small place like a caravan. Did you have strict rehearsal times, or was it just?
No,
whenever?
No stricter. We didn't really rehearse because we were doing like 4 shows a week.
Okay.
And so before we got on the road, we obviously had to practice, but we more practiced by like, we'd get a little spot somewhere, so we'd learn 3 songs and we get them really good and we practice, and then kind of grow, and getting our first big gig or whatever. And when I say big gig, I mean like length of time, like an hour or 2 hours or whatever. But then once we're out on the road, excuse me. But then once we're out on the road, we were kind of doing so many shows every week that if someone was like, oh, I'm gonna learn a new song, we'd just practice it at sound check, and we just okay, let's practice this tonight. We just add 1 song in or whatever and we'd play it all weekend. So we didn't really rehearse per se, but we had to practice our instruments though, which was like hell on earth when you're a child, like, because we all had so many instruments to practice. And so like there was no like concessions for the people who were like trying to be like overachievers like me with 3 instruments. No, I still had to practice for half an hour, and I was like, Dad, it's an hour and a half of my life every day. And he was like, well, you want to play 3 instruments? I'm like, the rip off.
So the other 3 instruments were guitar and banjo, I think. Sorry, the other 2 instruments. So mandolin, guitar, right. Banjo. Yeah.
And look, I don't pride myself on being an excellent, like, I can get by on mandolin. I think I'm a good guitarist, like acoustic guitarist. Banjo, I have not picked up in, years. And you really need to be playing banjo every single day to stay good at and stay fast. And I wouldn't call myself a banjo player by any stretch of the imagination. So
but I did read you were saying when you took up guitar at the age of 12, it changed everything for you. So I'm wondering what it was particularly about that instrument that had that impact on you.
I think just because mandolin is like has a very specific sound, and it's quite tinny, it's got that mandolin sound to it. And so when I started playing guitar, I was more able to, write songs. And for me, that's kind of where, my real passion sort of came in. And I was already sort of writing songs, dabbling or whatever, but not really, taking it seriously. But then when I started playing guitar, then I was like, oh, this is much easier to write. Like, it sounds fuller, it's easier to do progressions, and, it just got more string. It just sounded nicer. And suddenly I was able to play all these songs that I loved as well and make them sound like they did on the record. And, that's kind of where I think songwriting sort of, in a way started for me.
Yeah. So you're on the road, you're practicing an hour and a half a day, you're performing, doing schoolwork, presumably, and also writing songs. So that was a fairly active young life.
Yeah. And look, my parents are like a pretty eccentric, like they have like a a weird way of looking at the world, which I love. And we are all, when people meet me, often people are just like, oh, she's a bit weird. And then I'm like, I am the most normal in my family. So wait, if you think I'm weird, wait till you meet the rest of them, because they're crazy. Like, I'm like the most socially acceptable. I'm the only one who's ever like held down a full-time job. Like, I'm the least weird. And so we did schooling, but it was very much like, my mum and dad were really big on life skills. They were really big on teaching us, how to, create our own curriculum. And so, every year my mum would sit down and we'd have to write out like a 5 or 10 year plan. And then we'd have to map out how we could get to those goals and what we were going to do this year to get to those goals, and, blah, 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 all this, crazy stuff that when you're 12, you're like, what am I doing? Oh, okay, sure, it's just what we do. And so, that's why my husband's like, no wonder you love your goal setting. I'm like, I know, my mom's been making me do it since I was 12. He's like, you're really good at it as well. I'm like, yeah, I take great joy in it.
Are your siblings also goal setters still?
Yeah, we're all a bit that way inclined. Like, they all my siblings are a bit weird and wacky, and my brother works with my dad on the farm. Like, they like work very closely together and run their businesses together. My sister, she is a chef, but she's she started her own business here in Parks, but she also has like a 6-month-old baby, which she started a business after when her baby was 3 months. So I don't know, she's, it's what she did, but she's got 5 kids, so she's got a very full life. But I'm like, she's a vibe. And then my younger sister, she just has 1 kid, and she, I think, is probably, I think, musically the most talented of any of us. Like, I remember she locked herself in a house once and learned piano in 6 weeks and could play piano better than I could after 10 years of lessons. She's just so talented, but slightly unmotivated, so sad for her. I don't think she's ever going to listen to this interview.
So you're the one who basically has carried it through. I
always tease my family, and I always have this joke with them. I'm like, it's so funny because I'm like the least talented of all of you guys, but you're also lazy.
Well, talent and application is the magic combination, not one alone.
It really is. And I look and I think like, talent, I think, is sometimes like neither here nor there, in that, you can grow your skill with practice and dedication, and you can become better at what you do. And I think that my husband and I have talked about this a lot, because when we were in, I went to the most amount of school. So I did a lot of primary school and then homeschooled, once we were on the road when I was 12. So I did a lot of primary school. But we're talking about how he and I were both in like the gifted and talented classes, and we're like, what like a doozy though when you get into the real world. There's no gifted and talented classes anymore, and you're just like a normal human. It sucks.
You gotta work.
You really have to work, and so it's really hard to then adjust, and I think that's probably the case for a lot of millennials who went through that sort of vibe of schooling where I naturally found school not too hard. Like I enjoyed it, and it was, came to me quite easily, but I've had to work really hard, and I know my son is going to struggle. I see it already in him, and I'm like, oh, I'm sad for you, bud, because when he gets things really easily, great, but if he can't, he like has this tantrum that I can't explain, and I'm like, oh, I have that tantrum inside, I just don't let the world see it, like when I can't do things easily. And I think that's the hard thing with anything, with music, with anything, is like sometimes you just got to work it, you just got to keep trying, and there's no other, nothing beats hard work, I don't think. So
well, and the discipline you learn when you're learning an instrument, let alone multiple instruments, can be really useful in the right hands. I guess some people rebel against it, but I think it can stand people in really good stead if they want to learn a new skill or just carry on the ones they have. And it certainly seems for you, you're constantly applying. You're writing songs. That's another discipline that probably benefited from that repetition. And the repetition when you're learning an instrument can seem really boring. Like, where am I getting? This doesn't sound any better. And then one day it
does. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think songwriting is probably where I put most of my time these days. I hardly ever play mandolin or banjo or even piano, to be honest. Like I just play guitar a lot and songwrite. And I think even with songwriting, I was saying to actually someone I was doing an interview with earlier, we were talking about like the art of songwriting and how, I used to feel very proud about the idea that if I could write a song and I write it, it comes out, and then I'm like, I didn't edit it, like I did, it just came out and it was just beautiful, like, it's finished or whatever. And I really thought that was like something to take great pride in. If I didn't have to try to, like, it always feels like I'm more authentic if the song just comes out, like, and it's just like, I'm just naturally gifted. Like, oh, it's so embarrassing how I think about, the way I used to think about things. Because now when, I think about songs often, when I write, I'll do a lot of my creating of new works quite like late at night, because that's when I have the lowest inhibitions, right? My judgmental voice is turned off, right? Because I'm just tired, and I'm just like, let's just create and see what happens. But then when I'm editing a song, that's when I usually have my fresh, like, sprightly head that's just like, okay, we're here to work, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to make the song the best it can be. And now, that I'm older, I see both of those things and think they're equally a beautiful part of songwriting. But when I was much younger, I think I kind of viewed like, the editing or the rewriting side of things as kind of like, well, that's just a loser's game. If you can't write the songs right the first time. So that's how I thought, right? But now I'm just like, no, like this is called becoming a better songwriter, and looking at your work with a different perspective and making sure it's the best it can be. So
It does require ruthlessness, though, and that's probably the most distressing part of it, is having to be ruthless with your own work, because I think you can intellectually understand the need for the edit, but then to actually look at your work and think, or whatever it is, it's tough. It can be tough.
Yeah. And I've got songs where I've literally, like, you know, there's a song on my album called You Ain't One of Us, that I wrote that song without ever writing it. I put a voice record on my phone and I sat there and I already kind of knew what I wanted to say. And I just played and played and played and played for, you know, 20 minutes and then stopped the voice record. And then I didn't even listen to it for like 2 months. I just like was like, okay, great, got that out of my system. And then I came back to it a couple of months later and re-listened to it. And I was like, okay, I think this could be a song, but there's going to have to be some cutting here from this song. And so there's like entire portions of that, like the first bridge that I wrote. I'm not sure if you know the song or not, but the bridge is already quite long. But the bridge that I wrote had like 18 mournful parts to it. I was just like, oh my gosh, girl, you got a lot of feelings going on in this song. So, but you know, you just gotta make it palatable. And there's this quote that I saw Jason Isbell tweet a couple probably 6 months ago now, but like literally like changed the way I thought about things. And he was saying, like, someone had asked him like, what's your best songwriting advice? And he was like, never settle for anything less than exactly what you want to say. And I was like, oh, that's so good. Like, because in songwriting, so many times you settle because you can't make it rhyme or you can't get the phrasing right, and it's like, that's close to what I want to say, so just we'll go with that, you know, like it's close, sort of what I want to say. And so I think like that's something that I've really tried to think about with my songs is this what I want to say, or am I just settling for something a little bit less than what I mean? So it's
great advice. I'm going to think about it as well. And
I know when he said, I was like, easy, thanks, Jace, I'll just do that every time now. So easy.
May take more work, but I'll get there. Yeah. Because that is the thing, yes, you can develop that habit of settling, I guess, and habit of thinking that's good enough. Yeah. But once you've had that realization that it's actually not, you probably won't be satisfied with anything else. So yes. Could create some discomfort. But another skill that is learned is performance. And of course, you started performing as a child. I've seen you perform live and you seem very at ease on stage and also very in charge. Like but performance is like a high wire act. You've got to keep the balls in the air without falling off. And it does take a lot of practice. So have you always felt at ease? Did it help that you were a child when you started performing, or did you rail against it when you were younger?
No, it was our job. And so we all worked really hard at it. Like, as in, you know, like me and my mum laugh about this because, like, you know, we talk about, like, you know, sometimes, you know, you see people perform, especially younger artists, like, not that I'm some expert or anything, but just, you know, having grown up performing, and you see people perform and they don't know how yet to capture the crowd. And it's just because, not because they're bad at it, they just haven't had enough practice, you know, and it takes a lot of time to figure out how to win a crowd over, I think, and what parts of you they're going to be interested in and what parts, you know, are going to be funny and not funny and so on and so forth. But me and my mum like laughed because when we were kids, you know, we'd have the set list, we'd all have the set list or whatever that we'd follow, and we had like 4 hours of songs. And, you know, more often than not, we were doing shows where like maybe you're in a pub and no one's really listening anyway, so, you know, whatever. But Dad would always, you know, have this idea. He would always be like, it doesn't matter if no one's listening, because there could be one person listening and you don't know who that one person is. And we're just like, okay, Dad, you're so annoying, but sure. And so we always used to get to our songs and, like, you know, we were like, this next song is, you know, it's, you know, I don't know, Runaway Train by Casey Chambers. And Dad would be like, he'd lean back and he'd be like, not good enough, try again. And we would be like, oh, I picked this song because, like, and so he'd make us like say these bits, and he would be like, come up with something, like after the show, he'd be like, come up with something interesting. And so he really pushed us, you know, on stage. And it was funny because, like, me and Faith probably got the worst of it, like my next youngest sister, but Savannah, who was like the baby of the family, she would just be like, nah. Sometimes he would be like, you're not getting paid. I don't care. Sure, no problem. She would care. She'd go off, and even to the point where we have this picture of her when we used to busk in Tamworth, where she'd gotten in trouble for something, not listening to that. And you can imagine when you're on stage, like, there's only so much you can give away on your face. Yeah. Right, like, you know, to your children that you want to kill. So, you know, and so Savannah at this one, Dad like docked her pay, because if we, you know, Dad was like, it's a job, if you don't do your job well, your pay will get docked, you know, it's up to you. And he paid us from the second we started. We always got paid, and he was really fair, like, and, you know, because people were like, you know, it's child labor. I'm like, money I'm making, it's not child labor, I'm telling you right now. I'm doing A-okay. Thank you very much for your concern.
Pocket money, or it could be paid for actual work.
Exactly, right? It's my allowance each week. But so this one picture, Savannah like had gotten in trouble, or her pay had been docked to the point where she was just like, well, I'm not playing because I'm not even getting paid tonight. So she walked off, she grabbed a tambourine and a shaker, and she went like 2 meters down from us and stood there and sang a little heart out with a little hat until she made about 20, but everyone was laughing, but like, because they all watched this interaction, and so everyone's laughing, people threw her money. And then she waited, but it's like she was only like, she would have only been like, 8 or 10, they're not old. And so then she waited, she got some money in her hat, and all of a sudden she was gone. We're like, where's she? We're on the stage, we're like, where's she gone? 5 minutes later, she comes back, she walks down, she sits right in front of us at the stage, and she's got a big pizza and a 1.25 litre of Coke. And she was like just sat there like guzzling no Coke, like who's losing now, suckers? I got my Coke and my pizza.
Gold.
She was the worst. Like she was so fun. Anyway, that's classic Savannah. But yeah, she's just such a funny job. But yes, we mostly had to, work really hard at our stage presence. We were still kids, so we weren't like, graded or whatever. But we certainly learned, the art of like what people find funny, what people don't find funny, and so on and so forth. And so I think being on the road the last couple of years, I was really surprised by how sort of quickly it all came back to me. And you learn, you learn if something's like, what people are interested in, what people want to hear about you. If I am trying to try out like a new bit, I have little bits that I say on stage, and if I'm trying to try out a new bit, I usually tell it like it's a story that Ben's told me. So if it doesn't go well, I can blame, well, that was Ben's story anyway.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And Ben's like, these are not my stories.
But who's going to believe him?
That's right. I don't give him a microphone on stage, so no one.
So at the moment, speaking of being on the road, you are on the road with Adam Harvey,
Yes.
and that's a different deal again, because that's someone else's crowd, and that you're playing to. I mean, it's a friendly crowd, I'm sure, but are there different considerations for you as a performer when you're going into that scenario, or you just think I'm here to entertain and have fun and let's go?
Yeah, I think like I've loved playing the support for Adam's show. I think his fans are really great, and they've been really accepting of me. But of course, you walk into the show knowing these people don't know me, and so you're starting with like a cold crowd, right? Where they're not, they're not there to see you, they're there to see Adam, and so you kind of like need to be on your game. The first I remember like the first show I did with Adam, I was so nervous. Like it was the first one, right? So I was so nervous. And I remember, doing the show or whatever. And then after we went to do, the merch or whatever. And I think I sold like 1 CD, and I was so upset because I was just like, oh man, that really sucks. Like I was hoping I was gonna sell more. And so that night I got home and I went through everything I said, and because I was like, okay, I'm not gonna be able to wing this. I need to like make a plan. And I tried to recall like, what did they laugh at? What didn't they laugh at? What, they stone cold me, like, like what worked, what didn't. And then I changed some things, I edited some things, I moved my set list around. And then the next night, I think I sold like, 30 or 40 albums on the second night. Like it was like really a dramatic change. And that really just reminded me, of like, people of course are buying your music, but the music alone is not enough for people who don't know you. Like they want to buy into your story, And so I think like I just was a little bit more vulnerable on the second night, and I told them a little bit more about myself. And, and I think because, Adam's crowd is like sort of a slightly different demo as well. I made sure, that my jokes made sense to people of that demographic, and so it is, I think it's a bit of a work of art trying to read a crowd, and sometimes you get it wrong, and sometimes people just don't like you, and that's okay as well. Not everyone's going to like you. Yeah, I think his crowd, to be honest, like have been really accepting of me, and I think that's because he's been accepting of me. Every night for his show, he introduces me on the mic. He's off stage, like off side of stage. I can't see him, but he like on the microphone says like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Adam Harvey, like my very special guest. And he always introduces me. And sometimes he plays jokes and he like mispronounces. Like the other day, he called me Raechel Whitchurch. I was like, you are the worst, Adam. Like, and he'd never done it before. And I was like really caught off guard. And he was like giggling. And I was like, so, but he's very funny and he's very welcoming. And I think because of that, his fans are then very welcoming of me.
He is also a Golden Guitar winner, which is a segue to say you are a Golden Guitar nominee twice over, one for New Talent and one for Traditional Country Album of the Year.
Yeah.
And I'm not at all surprised, but it must have been a lovely acknowledgement for you.
So lovely, especially after the last couple of years, like it's just been, well, I mean, you just don't know, like my entire career has operated in a pandemic. I've never had a music career outside of a pandemic. And so I'm like, this just feels like normal to me, like constant reschedules, feeling anxious all the time about whether or not you're going to get to your shows. And so, yeah, but the Golden Guitar thing, me and my team were had everything crossed that, maybe, just maybe we might get a New Talent nom. And so when we got that, we were so stoked. And then, obviously getting the Traditional Country Album of the Year nomination, that's one of the, the big ones at the end. And so that was a really lovely surprise, and also nice because I was the only girl nominated in that category. So, which was just lovely.
Absolutely lovely. And as I said, you absolutely deserve to be on that list. I won't say about who deserves to win because that would make me not impartial. But also mindful of the time, and you've had a lot of talking before this, and singers have to protect their voices. So I think I'll just now ask you a bit about just one question really about the album, Finally Clear, which is that I found the songs are it's sort of the holy grail for me of meaningful and entertaining. As a listener, I always think that I think a lot of audiences are looking for that because everyone wants a distraction of sorts. They want to be entertained, but they also want to feel like there's meaning in that. And especially if they're listening over and over again, those layers of meaning become more clear. It's not an easy balance to get right. And I think it does come from an intention to connect with an audience. And I'm wondering if that's something that's always been in your songwriting, or if it's something that you think you developed over those years of performance where you had a lot of interaction with audiences and came to know what audiences were looking for.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that I've never been asked that before. I think that it is a really hard balance, and I know exactly what you mean, because sometimes you get an album and you're just like, okay, yep, I listen to that album when I want to go to a dark place, that's what that album is. And then other times you listen to an album and you're like, okay, this is my party album, for fun times, but trying to find that balance where people can simultaneously feel entertained, but also, a range of emotions can be difficult. And of course, I did think about that when I was looking at, the songs for the record, and thought about it in the sense that, you don't have too many slow ones, you don't have too many, this, that, and the other. You want to, have a range of things. I do think though that probably what informs my songwriting the most in that sense is that I think that for better or for worse, I really like songs that have a clear sort of hook, I guess. I like a good hook, and that probably comes from just listening to a variety of music when I was younger. And so I think that if people can recognize songs easily, and that makes it more palatable for them in that sense. But I do think that and I liked what you said about the layers, because I think that most of my songs are moderately deep. I think they have a lot of depth to them, but often it's hidden by the way the song has been produced, or even I Found Home, which is the first song on my album, people just like, oh, it's just a happy love song. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also talks about me giving birth and people dying. It's not it's actually quite a deep song. It talks about souls getting saved in it. It's not just this wishy-washy oh, I love love, and so I think that most of my songs, if you look for it, probably have quite a bit of depth to them, I would hope, but it's probably not as obvious as if you're not looking for it, if that makes sense. So maybe that's why people find them entertaining. I don't know, because you don't have to feel the deep if you don't want to.
Yeah, and maybe it's also what they're wanting in that moment. And certainly the last couple of years, I think entertainment has been high on the agenda for a lot of people.
Yes.
But the good thing is the album's always there for them to go back to. And yeah, I don't think they're moderately deep. I think they're quite deep, your songs.
Thank you.
And to the level that the audience wants to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is part of that art, the art and skill and the talent and application of being a songwriter and a performer is knowing how to draw people in and how to not force them in, I guess.
Yeah. And I think like as well with songs, like the other thing is like really like, you know, especially for me as a millennial, you know, like we've been growing up with this, you know, this rhetoric, you know, that was told to us throughout school and by parents, whatever, like you're special, you're you know, you're so special, you're so unique, you can do anything you want to do, all in these lines, right? I actually, as I've become an adult, and since especially releasing this album, I don't think we're really that special. I think we're all pretty much the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like I think like we all have the same emotions, we all have the same feelings. And so when I put this album out, you know, there's some songs where I was like, people are not gonna like that song. One of them was My Father. I was like, that's gonna be way too personal. Like it's so specifically about my dad. People are not even gonna connect with that song. And then I have people at shows be like, you could have written that about my dad. And I'm like, but it didn't. I wrote it about my dad, like so specifically about my dad. And so I think that's the thing is like, you know, we think we're very special and unique, but I think at the end of the day, we all just have the same feelings, you know, the same emotions. And I think that maybe that's why people like me as well, because I'm just a boring girl who just feels the same feelings as you. So
Yet you can articulate them in a way that a lot of people can't. I think that's the key, is that you're giving people permission to feel those feelings. So Raechel, so wonderful to talk to you. The album is finally clear. The new single is Sure Thing Remastered, which originally appeared on your Outlaw EP. So you've released a deluxe version of the album. Good luck for the golden guitars.
Thank you so much. And thank you for saying all those nice things about my album as well. It's so nice when, you know, when people like, it's even like you saying like, oh, it is quite deep. Like, you know, as a songwriter, it's so nice when people connect with your records. I appreciate that from you. Thank you.
It's a wonderful album in case anyone's in any doubt. Go and listen to it. Thanks,
Thank
Raechel.
you.
Bye.